Hey, what's up, everybody? BDF44 coming at you with another video. All right, so not much Laker news, of course, but we do have a signing to share. Phil Handy is going to be returning with the Lakers. Of course, we know Phil Handy's our assistant coach who's been here for a couple years. Been fantastic with young players and has had a tenure with LeBron James for many years. And just somebody we really, really like a lot. And we're happy that he's going to be continuing to stay with the Los Angeles Laker organization, to say the least. Um, it's one of those situations where I think Phil Handy is the exception to the rule. And the rule is, we don't want to have Darvin Ham's coaches be picked for him, going forward. And when I say we, I mean me as a Laker fan. We don't want that. But Phil Handy's the exception. And the reason why is because, first of all, I think Darvin Ham would have chosen Phil Handy anyway. He picks Phil Handy out of lineup without Phil Handy already being here. But second of all, Phil Handy speaks to all the stuff that we want our Laker team to be about. He's humble. He's good with the team, both the stars and the guys who are trying to work their way up. He represents himself with a certain level of class and dignity that the Los Angeles Lakers organization is all about. He vibes well with LeBron James, of course. He's good friends with Kyrie Irving, of course. And all of that just speaks to kind of the direction that the Lakers are trying to go in, obviously, as well. So right there, we see that we have something that the league wants in Phil Handy. He's one of the best assistant coaches out there, and I'm curious to see if he's going to be given an opportunity as a head coach if he wants one. Um, my gut is probably doesn't want one because I think he would already have been offered that. So we're happy to have him with our organization. We're happy with the role he's given. He's in, and he's given us. And at this point, it was a no-brainer to bring him back. In my mind, I think that was a no-brainer, and I'm happy that Darvin Ham is on board with him being a part of his staff because that's something as fans we really want as well. We really do. Um, so that's the little bit of news that I honestly have on the Los Angeles Lakers. Everything else is just me making up stuff to talk about because it ain't nothing. There's literally nothing. But I can honestly say that as I continue to learn about our team and I continue to grow about our team, one thing that did stand out is a picture I saw of Lonnie Walker. He looks like he's put on a lot of weight. He looked like he's put on a whole lot of muscle. Now, he was never a skinny dude, to be honest with you. And the times that I saw him in San Antonio, he seemed like he can get off the ground. He's certainly athletic. It wasn't a skinny guy. But now he looked like he put on muscle and he's ready to push around and maybe play a little 3 for us. Definitely some 2 for us. So I'm curious to know what his game looks like. That's what I'm curious about because I know that he was in Popovich's dog house for a little bit a few years back, but there were sequences where he got off to a good start. For example, as a rookie, he had a good couple of sequences where you would see that he could really play, and then he went into the doghouse, and he came back out of the doghouse, so to speak, was given some minutes and had some spectacular games. Now, this was years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I was paying somewhat a close attention to him during that era. For some reason, I distinctively remember zeroing in on the Spurs and seeing how he was doing the early addition of Keldon Johnson back then. So I was just kind of looking at their team, paying attention, and he was having a week or two at that time where he was really going off. I think it was a game where he had a huge comeback or something like that. The team was down like 20 points, and he was the driving force behind them coming back offensively. So little stuff like that sticks out in my mind. I would have to be educated on what it is that went down there, though, to ultimately know how his tenure went. But when you're with Popovich for 5 years, however many years it's been now, that's a very good thing because you understand that Popovich is going to instill certain um, principles and rules in him, not only as a pro, but also as a man that I think will carry over and make him a great professional going forward. And anybody that comes out of that system, I expect the same from. If they took well to Pop, and most do. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that Spur mentality actually has been because it ain't about the championship Spurs necessarily because he wasn't a part of any of the success, but he was a part of the rebuild and those teaching principles that Popovich instilled. I want to know what that looks like for players who've been in that situation for the last couple of years. So we got a chance to get one, and I'm curious to know with the minutes he's given if he can earn the starting spot with our team. Um, he's going to have a lot of competition, to say the least. But right now, I'd say our shooting guard position is the position that, in my mind, looks the most flexible right now. Kendrick Nunn, himself. We got um, Austin Reeves, and then you got the other guards as well. You got Pippen, Christie. Um, there's other guys that you could slip into that position as well. Could play this two guard spot. Of course, we're losing Malik Monk this year, and we're not bringing back some of those guys that we brought back, the vets from last year. We're not bringing any of those dudes back. So that's what our shooting guard position looks like. And I think it's up in the air. Nunn, Reeves, um, Walker. And I think Walker has a good chance of taking that. Maybe there's another player on the roster that's just not popping up. THT you may want to consider for shooting guard if he's not able to be traded, although I expect full well for him to be traded. And so we'll see what happens with that position. I don't know that Kendrick Nunn's going to be retained as well. I got a good mind to think that he's going to be involved in a trade as well. The numbers there just make sense. Kendrick Nunn and THT, you're going to probably offer them up in whatever trade packages you can involve Russell Westbrook to get back talent in return. So I just expect that to be the case. And if that's the case, then we will know Lonnie Walker will have a solidified role at that two guard spot with some minutes attached to it. So that's what we're hoping to see. Lonnie Walker get a good dose of minutes and him do good things with those minutes, of course. What else is there? Obviously, we're still waiting on information on Kyrie Irving. If there's anything to be said, we'll certainly give it to you here. But right now, there's nothing. The theory stands in my mind. He's still trying to lobby to get that 5-year deal, and that it's not on the table. But Brooklyn needs to go back to the table and figure out what they want to put on it. Because right now, nothing that they want to get back in trade looks any good in terms of what they're expecting. So I don't know that works in our favor in terms of what it is we're trying to build here. I don't know that it does, because if they go back to the drawing board and they're thinking like me, you're probably going to try to offer Kyrie a multiple year deal now that you realize you can't get the trade for KD, and that the best bet is to try to bring him back and ask him to stay with you. The only hope now is that he says, I want to move forward with the Nets without Kyrie. At that time, then we'll be certain they will trade him to us if we're the only suitor, obviously. If for some reason that doesn't happen and he says, no, the plan is this. If you want me to stay, you got to sign Kyrie. And they come to the conclusion that they need him to stay. The solution is to pay Kyrie. Simple as that. And we've said that more than once. Nobody's going to be surprised if that were to take place, because that is what I believe they're trying to do. And since KD hasn't been traded, it's not off the table. So, Laker fans, I'm not sitting here telling you that we're not getting Kyrie Irving. I'm telling you nothing's changed. The same tune that I sung last night, same tune I sung 3 months ago, or rather 3 weeks ago, is the tune I'm singing right now. I don't think the Nets want to put that on the table. I think Joe Tsai would desperately like to keep KD while moving on from Kyrie and getting back from Kyrie what he wants for Kyrie in trade. Meaning, the Lakers giving up those 2 picks. And possibly other things that may involve salary flexibility for him, which could entail Russell Westbrook not landing with him in Brooklyn, which is also something I think the Lakers are already ready for. That's why we got Indy on the sidelines hoping to take that from us as well, which I think will be combined as a multi-team trade. I do think Indy will ultimately get involved with Miles Turner and Buddy Hield if they're interested in moving on from those salaries. I still think those guys are out of there. I think Buddy will probably end up with us, and I think Turner will probably end up in Brooklyn. I think Westbrook's contract ends up in Indy, and I think Kyrie ends up here, and probably other fillers to make the contracts work. Like I said, none somewhere else. Maybe Joe Harris moves on from Brooklyn to here or something like that. But that's ultimately what I think will be landed upon in the event that Kyrie Irving is moved. That's just my guess. I guess that. If not, then San Antonio will probably get involved somehow and get Westbrook from us. But I don't think so, because I think the Lakers have their eyes on Buddy Hield. And I guess that's something I can segue to. Rumor has it that Buddy Hield's been looking for apartments here in LA. Just like they said, Kyrie is trying to buy a house in LA. I would say take it with the same grain of salt. Maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But the point is, it looks like that information is out there. Buddy's trying to find a way to move to Los Angeles, or California to be exact. And given the fact that his team is in Indiana, yeah, that seems like that would be kind of strange. It's one thing to buy a house. You see what I'm saying? Everybody buys a house. AD had a house in LA before he got here. I'm sure other players too. But to rent, that's different. Nobody's looking to rent in a city that they're not going to reside in, especially at the end of summer. That doesn't make any sense. Is he going to rent the spot for 2 months? I don't know. Maybe he's renting it for somebody else. None of my business. But the point is, if that information is true, it lends itself to him expecting to be in Los Angeles very soon. So, again, grain of salt. What I do know is that the Lakers have been looking at Buddy Hield for a long time, as you guys know. We've been trying to acquire him for almost 3 years now, and we've gotten very close. We know he's a Rob Pelinka client, and I think there may be something to that in terms of him coming here and Rob having been his agent in the past. Something to that, meaning, is there a power struggle there for why he isn't here already? Because I'm pretty sure Rob would have had him here already several times over as his client, previous client. And I just think that the fact that he isn't here, we went with Russell Westbrook last year, that looks like that could have been a power struggle. And maybe that's why we landed on Russell Westbrook, despite it not being the better basketball fit, because the power struggle there between the two agencies. And so that's just something I'm looking at. I don't know, when I say two agencies, that's not the right way to word it. Between the two parties in the situation being Rob Pelinka and LeBron James. Because agencies would not be the right term, because Russell Westbrook is not a part of Clutch. But what I will say is, if LeBron James is lobbying for Russell, and Rob Pelinka is lobbying for Buddy, and we landed on Russell, that's what I see there. That's what I see there. I don't know if that's what it is, but that's what it looked like. And that could ultimately determine why things are the way they are right now. I wish my mind would have been thinking clearly back then. I would have been able to see this a little bit better, but last year I should have been vehemently against the trade package for Russell Westbrook, because it really did put us in a hole, adding any trade equity to that. Any pick equity to that trade. No picks should have been added to that trade. If we were going to take back Russell Westbrook's contract, sending out salary to match at the time didn't seem unreasonable. But if I'm not mistaken, we sent out a pick or two. So I got to go back and check. But I just don't think the price tag on Russell Westbrook was good for us at the time. And I think we settled for it because we wanted to bring him in. And that's why I think it's very important we don't do the same with Kyrie Irving. Let the price tag not be something we just forget about. Make sure the price tag makes sense for what it is we're doing, and acquire the player, because that's the mistake we made with Russell Westbrook. That price tag should have never been paid at all. If you want to get rid of KCP and Kuzma, I still don't have a problem with moving KCP and Kuzma, but no pick equity at all. That should have never happened, and certainly not for a salary dump like Russell Westbrook's contract, which it was at the time, even though he was attached a very, very great Hall of Fame player. It was still a terrible contract. We should have known better. We should have known better. So that's what I'm thinking about, man. Just little stuff that you wish your team would have did a little differently, or put you in a better situation. But now that we're going forward, we just look at what we have here. And the Russell Westbrook contract is still on tab. We believe it must go. I think that's safe to say. I like the fact that I haven't heard a whole lot about Russell Westbrook and his agent situation. It's somewhat been silenced or put to bed. Whatever. As the conversation gets brought back up, of course it will be brought back up. But what you're not hearing much about it, and that's a good thing. Hopefully Russell Westbrook's getting reacclimated with the team so that we can get our leverage back on in place and proceed to get back to the trading board with him. As long as people think he's on his way out or wants to leave, to be exact, we're in trouble. It's going to be hard to move him. It's going to be much more expensive to move him. So, as I think about this upcoming season, I recognize and agree that it is very important. He is not our starting point guard this season, but it's also very important we don't have $47 million worth of player missing next year as well. So we got to find something that works for us in regards to that. We can't sit him, as I once suggested. Paying him to go home? Yes. Is your team not with the player that may struggle? Yeah, you don't have the player that struggles, which means you have more cohesive basketball play, in theory. So if you look at him as a minus, then letting him go is a plus for the season. However, you still need that $47 million to represent a portion of your team, because the rest of the league, as we always talk about, has their full piece of the pie. That $47 million is represented some way, somehow, one player or another, and it's coming at you. So what you need is that to come at them with. That's why we can't have Russell Westbrook on this team this season at that price. That's why we must not start the season with him at $47 million. Now, that's skewed as well, because you can fix that by trading him during the season. You know what I mean? And if you can get more for him later than you can for him now, then by all accounts, holding on to him till after the season starts is in fact a better strategy, so long as he isn't on the team for too long at that price, taking from us what we would otherwise need to win games. If we're able to win games during that period, and we're not falling or we're not seeing ourselves go by the wayside, then the experiment should be working. And we should be able to effectively trade him at any given moment up until the trade deadline for the requisite amount of pieces to make us good enough to win. So it's not all lost if we start the season with him, but we must not finish the season with him. We must not go well into the season as we start to lose games with it. That can't happen. If we get off to a slow start, and it's evident that is the problem, that we're not good enough or not deep enough or etc., we don't have enough talent on the floor, it's going to be because we don't have that $47 million represented in other areas. So that's the key. It's getting that 47 represented in the right stuff in time to save your season. So that's the goal. That's the equation. You got to figure it out or you're going to fail. So that's how I look at it. I think the Lakers are in a good spot in terms of not letting things go completely left in that way. Which I'm pretty confident we should be able to get rid of that contract before the trade deadline, and I hope that will be enough time. If Anthony Davis and LeBron James are healthy, it'll be enough time. If Anthony Davis goes down, I don't think it'll matter if we would have traded him or not. We're still not going to be good enough. That's the reality of it. Even if we make a trade for Kyrie Irving and bring in Buddy Hield, we will be a playoff team if AD goes down, but we won't win the championship by any stretch of the imagination in my mind. Not a chance. We need AD to be healthy. And that is still something I do not love. And that's just the dynamic of our team. But even with the trades that we're about to make, it's still the same foundation that it was last year. If there's no AD, we don't win. And I told you guys that, I got to tell myself and remind myself that I did kind of see the struggles of the Lakers coming if AD wasn't there. I did say that. Because it was obvious. We didn't have the bigs. We didn't have the youth. It was set to fail if AD wasn't healthy. But if AD was down there, in theory, Westbrook and Bron should be able to somewhat, in some ways, rotate around him. And even if they're struggling to make it work with each other, he can be the focal point of the offense. As long as they keep dumping the ball off to him, they should be able to close possessions just fine. See, that was the theory. Even if Russell Westbrook's garbage, even if LeBron James isn't shooting well, AD is the focal point. He finishes the plays. But that ain't what we get from AD, and that's the problem. We need that dynamic in place for this team to win. And I think that's what we had in 2020, and that's why we were able to. You bring that dynamic back to the fold, and I think we could be a very solid team once again. Elite, the field is different, so I don't know if we can be elite. But we definitely feel like we can win if we just continue to bring the pieces that make sense to that duo. So last year's piece, obviously Russell Westbrook did not make sense, but we were going to try to get away with it, and hopefully his massive strengths, so to speak, the Russell Westbrook's ability to take over the game by himself, at the time, you thought would be able to supplement LeBron James' absence if for some reason he got hurt. That was the logic. Yeah, AD and Russell Westbrook could lead you to glory while LeBron James heals from his ailment. Right? That's the vision. But when you don't have enough complementary pieces and athleticism to make any of that make sense, you're leaning too much on Bron to stay healthy. You're leaning too much on AD to stay healthy. They didn't have enough help. There was no Wenyen Gabriel, no Stanley Johnson to start the season last year. So you see why it circles back to why Russell can't stay on the team for too long this year. It's the equivalent of what we started the season with last year before we got Stanley Johnson and Wenyen Gabriel. Once you brought those pieces to the place, everything fell into place then. Guys started looking better, playing better. We started winning games. But we took too long bringing those pieces to our situation. Had we brought those guys to our team in the first 3 weeks of the season, we probably would have saved our season and made the play-in tournament. But because they came too late, because we didn't get them acclimated to what we were doing until well after we were mathematically out of the game, that's what happened. So Lakers need not make that mistake this year. For some reason, we're stuck with Russell Westbrook's contract, and make sure that we bring pieces to us that don't make it so that we're so reliant upon AD to stay healthy in order for us to be successful. That is what I want to do. I want to kind of pull back from this AD reliance that we Lakers have, because he's not a strong foundation. That is my problem with him. And I trust and respect that he's working out with the right people right now. All that's cool, it's fine. But the situation I want AD to be in going forward does not have it so that he makes or break the championship situation. I'm sorry, he can't make or break it, because if you're challenging him to stay healthy, that's not a good bet. You know, it's just not. If that's what you're banking on, don't. So that's why I'm on the mindset that the Lakers, and I'm gonna say it again, and I know this makes me a bad guy, but that's why I think the Lakers should consider kicking the tires on Kevin Durant involving Anthony Davis. I know I'm the only person saying that, and I respect why no one else is saying it, because it is important to keep the guy that wants you. He wants to be here. We don't have an insubordinate NBA Hall of Fame. Anthony Davis wants to be here, right? You bring in Kevin Durant, he may very well ask out. You don't have him for 4 years. You have him for 4 minutes. So I'm not saying the Lakers should make a move without being certain of what happens when they do. What I'm telling you is, if for some reason it's a go, and everything would be fine if they do, I think it's something to consider, because I think Kevin Durant's a stronger foundation. He's a stronger foundation. I can trust him to be on the floor more than Anthony Davis. I can trust that it's easier to have Kevin Durant on the team without being reliant on him to stay healthy in order for us to succeed. Because you're not relying upon him to be your anchor on the inside. You're not relying upon him to be your main rebounder in some cases, although we don't. We're not relying upon him to be our main rim protection. We're not relying upon him to ultimately be the focal point of finishing plays like we were last year. Like we will be this year in some cases. I think Kevin Durant slots in differently. He becomes one of many wing weapons, albeit a very lethal and elite wing weapon, but still one of several. You're more reliant upon the other bigs, like Jones, like Bryant, to do the things that Anthony Davis is going to be expected to do. Play defense, roam, etc. You're going to be relying upon Huff and those guys to do those things. But they're not going to be relied upon to get 30 and 40 points. That's going to be KD's job, a separate job. You see what I'm saying? Anthony Davis has both jobs. You bring in KD, he doesn't. And that's what I'm looking at, based on the fit of what I see in our team. Because what we have here, with Anthony Davis on the floor, you don't have Thomas Bryant, you don't have Jones, you don't have Huff. Those guys are sitting. You're asking Anthony to do their job and his job at that at that center position. You're asking him to do their job and his job at the center position. And LeBron James has to play the 4 or the 5 in order to play with Anthony Davis. That does not have to happen with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant can play all positions. LeBron James can play all positions. Anthony Davis cannot. So you gotta slot Anthony in at the 5 and the 4, which pushes your roster to kind of playing certain players that you're probably not better for having on the floor. You're probably not better for having sitting, based on the way your team is constructed. You see what I'm saying? This team, to me, is built more so for LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving to slip in than Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Kyrie Irving. Because of all those young bigs that we just picked up, the Juan Toscano Anderson, again, the names that have already been mentioned, including God, where's my head at? Stanley Johnson and Wenyen Gabriel, including those players, including Cole Swider. All of those guys have to not be on the floor so that AD can be on the floor and playing his regular stuff. Bron moves to the 4. Those guys are not on the floor because of it. You see what I'm saying? All these dudes we done picked up? Nah, they have to be a part of the second unit in order for our first unit to make sense. You bring in Kevin Durant? No more of that. No more of that. You put him at the 3. You can move Bron to the floor. You got those 5s on the floor. You can move Bron to the 3. Have KD at the 4. Have KD at the 3. You can do all kinds of different stuff that you can't do with our lineup right now. You just cannot do. Now, I can't argue you're a worse defensive player, of course. Team, of course, because you don't have Anthony Davis. You are a worse defensive team. But you're a more consistent offensive team because Kevin Durant will score 40 points a night, especially with LeBron James and Kyrie Irving next to him. It's too many open shots. As to where Anthony Davis we expect to struggle from behind the arc because he struggled last year from behind the arc. He struggled around the perimeter. So his jump shooting may actually not return. And if that's the case, we have spacing issues, especially with Damian Jones on the floor. You know what I mean? Now you got rim protection, but no jump shooting. So it's like we're lacking shooting because we've gotten so much front court help. AD ain't a shooter. Kevin Durant is. Simple as that. So while I definitely respect the Lakers not making the trade, and I hear everybody who says we shouldn't make the trade, and I can certainly slot a few players here and there to make this team fit AD much more than it does right now. That ain't going to be a problem. But, yeah, I truly believe this in my head as I look at it. It's much easier to slip in Kevin Durant and not be so reliant upon him while being able to rely upon him more so because he's more reliable. Just thought. It is what it is, man. I know they're not going to do that because, again, you got to keep the guy that wants you. You know what I mean? You don't, in the mix of all of this, you don't want to piss off somebody who's not unhappy. So I totally get it why they will not do this. But 4 years of Kevin Durant, I really value that in a different way. And judging by what we don't have a bunch of young players. You feel me? Like, if I were in OKC's position, I wouldn't want to do that. If I was in the Rockets' position, probably not. But in our position, we ain't got no young players. Nah. AD is 30 almost. I don't mind trading a 30-year-old for Kevin Durant. That's just how I am. I'm not as quick to trade Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes. I'll trade Anthony Davis. You see what I'm saying? That's just my mentality. Because I don't value wear and tear. Anthony Davis got 11 years on his legs. No, I can trade that for the wear and tear of KD. Because they both old and used. You see what I'm saying? So that's how I equate that situation. I would never, ever trade an Anthony Edwards for Kevin Durant. I would never do that. So that's the logic. I think we're in the best position to do it based on the age of the player we have to offer. And the fact that we don't have to offer no more than one body. Everybody else has to offer 100 bodies and 100 picks. We can offer one body and get Kevin Durant. One body. Anthony Davis. You give it, because that price tag on Anthony Davis is just as high as Kevin Durant. So you take AD, I take Kevin Durant. You don't take nothing else from me because I value KD that much. AD is not asking for a trade request, so his value is higher. Simple as that. So that's why it makes sense as well. All in all, if Genie ain't up for it, I certainly wouldn't do it. People are talking about trading LeBron James for Kevin Durant. I would never do that. One season of LeBron James is worth more than 4 seasons. More than 4 seasons of Kevin Durant. I am sorry. I'm sorry. I know that's disrespectful. But I'm dead ass serious because that's what LeBron James is worth. His name, his likeness, his game is bigger than basketball. You're not just bringing LeBron James to your team. You're bringing multiple bags of billions to your team. That's what you're doing. You're bringing bags of billions to your city. It's way bigger than basketball. Please understand that. So, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Hell no, I'm not doing that. But what I will say is Anthony Davis is a fair trade. But LeBron James, LeBron James, you'd have to trade. You'd have to give me the star power of somebody else from another. You have to, like, we're trading. Who we traded, man? Give me the biggest soccer star. That's who we're trading. Ronaldinho or something. You're not going to trade him for nobody in the NBA, ladies and gentlemen. You trade them for Muhammad Ali. You trade them for Michael Jordan. Like, that's who you trade LeBron James for. You trade him for Michael Jackson. We're not trading him for anybody in the NBA. The value doesn't exist. So let's just make that very clear. I think I'll leave it at that, too. My name is BDF44. I thank you all for watching. I'm out.